Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, coming to you from Ave Maria, Florida. Dave Anderson from Dallas, Texas, and the founder, who's in southern Utah visiting his mom, Andy Fitzell. Welcome, Dave. Welcome, Andy. Welcome, listeners.
Hello. I'll just start saying hola. You end the podcast, with adios amigos. I'll just bring it at the beginning. Just say hola.
Well, I studied Spanish for 3 years. I'm very proud of that phrase. I remember. Let me read this off. 8 pillars: Vic Braden, Welby Van Horn, Dennis Vandermeer, Peter Burwash, Harry Hobman, Jim Verdick, Bill Jacobson, Jim Lair. Website's free, 5 courses. Tennis Intelligence Applied is 1 course. It's 25 hours long. There's over 100 coaches mentioned. We have close to 300 podcasts, well over 1,000. That's I think a low ballpark number of video clips. We've been on Facebook almost every day. I'd say missed just 2 or 3 for nearly 20 years. This all started in 1981, putting some homework together. And our mission is to help tennis. People learn to teach better and play better. Lou Holtz. What comes to your mind when you think of Lou Holtz, guys? The late Lou Holtz.
Legend.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. Like many people from that generation, strong character coach. Probably would have struggled in the current NCAA situation, but character.
I think Andy for sure has had the privilege of meeting the one and only Luke Wickham. I don't think you've met Dave. They met Luke, Dave.
Haven't met him. Mm-mm.
He was head coach for Vic Braden. He's in real estate now. He's in Orlando. So he was helping me with a project, and we were in a restaurant. And it's amazing that the day Lou Holtz passed away, I was in the same restaurant. Now, he had just become a widower, and the Lake Nona Country Club is just right up the street. And Wickham said, "Hey, Smith, Lou Holtz is over there. He's sitting alone, watching TV. It was at Chili's." And they said, "Okay, we'll wait." And we waited till he was done. And I went up to the table and I said, "Lou Holtz, I know more about Lou Holtz than Lou Holtz." And then I started rattling off Lou Holtz quotes. And then even went to speeches, like when he was the coach at the University of Minnesota. And he's talking to a group of donors in Minneapolis and said, "I want to let you know the heart and soul of this team is going to come from Minnesota." Then he paused like any good comedian and he said, "But the legs and arms are coming from out of state because there's no speed in this whole state." So get the big farm boys to be the interior linemen. But I wrote this down, win. We use this all the time. What's important now? There's so many great quotes from Coach Holtz.
I've heard that story from you. It's almost what I know about Lou Holtz is I've heard that story a few times, and then obviously that acronym WIN. Amazing football coach,
football
obviously.
Coach. When all is said and done, more is said than done. Well, that's the amazing thing about YouTube is that you want to listen to commencement speeches with Lou Holtz or just Q&As. Yeah, you are what you make yourself. You are what you make yourself. It's great to be successful. It's greater to be significant. This is probably the most important one to share. Years ago, players would ask, what are their obligations and responsibilities? Today, they ask, what are their rights and privileges? I'll give you one more. Pressure comes from when someone calls on you to perform on a task in which you are unprepared. Pressure comes when someone calls on you to perform a task for which you are unprepared. I got a couple quotes from Dave Anderson. You want to hear those, Fitzell?
Sure, why not?
Are they from Dodgeball?
From our last, that was a good movie, Dodgeball. From our last podcast, the one-eyed man is the king in the land of the blind.
Not a Dave Anderson original, but I do love that one.
Yeah, where'd you pick that one up? That was a good one.
I don't know. I guess When I kind of went down to almost one eye, I became a connoisseur of one-eyed quotes. I don't know, but it perfectly described junior tennis.
This is another from Anderson just last week. One loss away from switching programs. Most tennis parents and their player are one loss away from switching programs. That must be an original, right?
That could be, or a slightly adapted version of something I heard. But it's a true statement, more than a quote for sure.
Let me ask you, Dave, and Andy, you can chime in. I mean, obviously a world-class player, so many accomplishments. Kruger is playing Townsend. I've said before that Townsend may have the best tactics in all of women's tennis. Why don't you go first on that? Andy, what do you think?
Well, she's coming the net from, and she's playing doubles and doing well, so it helps being left-handed also. And then her mentality, she's definitely rocking to the tune of her own song. She's, not really paying attention to what outside opinions have to offer. It sounds like she's got a pretty tight unit, and she's doing the things her own way. So, but I really haven't seen her play too much. Been on the court one time with her for a warm up, and that's about it. But she's got some tools that others don't, for sure.
It's certainly a sensationalistic comment, but it just seems like so few people, men or women, go forward. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Andy said about the fact that she can serve pretty well and has a bit of variety off the ground, and sets her up to, utilize the skills that she shows so well in doubles. I watched most of her matches in Austin. I don't think it was a particularly strong draw, but she, hung in there and found her way through it and ended up losing to Stearns. I don't think she went forward really much throughout the whole tournament. We all remember back to when she made that run, and she went through, some good players, really almost exclusively serving and bowling. I don't see her doing that as much anymore, but she's a great bowler, great instinct up there.
Andy, why don't you expound upon? Recently, you told me you're talking to Navratilova, and I've said for years that she won Wimbledon 9 times, and that underspin backhand approach shot. Can we name 9 women, maybe 9 men too? 9 women have hit that shot since she retired. You actually asked her that, right?
Yeah, I was at the U.S. Open, just in one of the lounge areas, and she sat down next to me, and I just couldn't help myself. And so we started talking about that topic. And then she said, yeah, and the way players are hitting it, in her words, she said, they're not knifing it, but it was basically just we talked about how they're, swinging east to west on it versus really going out through it. And yeah, it's basically just, hey, it's a shame, but it's not being taught, obviously, from the younger ages too often, and people aren't really working at it.
Certainly people are swinging east and west, but if you cover the mobility, say, okay, here's, Roger Federer making the hit, and then after the ball's gone, they start to propel themselves to the net, and that certainly adds to the east-west look. And, certainly times the players have to improvise, but it's one of those things that's a lost art. The underspin backhand approach shot. We ask people for feedback all the time. They should do it because 1, 2, 3, 4 is give out the rationale that when the ball's in flight, they're in movement, they get closer to the net. They're giving their opponent less speed, and the trajectory keeps the ball low. It's great to play on a diagonal. That's one negative, I think, when a righty plays it into a lefty's forehand, but that's where if the lefty has a Western grip on the forehand, that's where people have to understand that basic information grows. And if you understand the basics, I think in a lot of ways it's a bluff when someone tells you they're a strategy coach. If you don't know stroke reduction.
Right.
Here's one thing, grips. I did this the other day with some players. Do it all the time, but you take the old computer labels and take 2 of them and wrap them around the top of a grip, hand the kid a pen and say, okay, go over that bench by yourself, go to that bench by yourself. And then it's the grip test. They'll come back and, do you know the grips? Can you use the Braden system where you number say a righty, top panel to the right, put a B, and there's a dot on the right side of number 1 for the backhand grip and 2 for the serve. But to me, if you don't know grips, it's going to be difficult to really know a lot about strategy. In other words, to go deeper, like, why are they doing this? Why do you know ahead of time how the player will hit the ball?
Mm-hmm.
But Andy, last week we talked about Craig Tiley being the USTA new CEO. And I've read many things. I've had many things sent to me. And Paul McNamee, a great player who at one point certainly was very critical of Tiley. And I think number one is that he wanted to be, the director of player development perhaps when Tiley was, or he wanted to be the CEO when Tiley was. But now he's saying that Tiley did a fantastic job with the Australian Open. And it's a compliment. He's saying they need to hire 3 people to take his job. They're not going to find somebody who works 365 days, 16 hours a day. I thought that was the norm. Did you, Anderson?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like I said, everything's a vacation to my wife now from when I was around the early days in the time at Tennis Tech. So whenever I complained, she just said, "You barely work anymore." So yeah.
I've spent like 25 years doing things with Fitzell, and he knows it's a pretty light schedule that we have.
Yeah, I mean, sleeping in closets and
that was a
kitchen floors.
That was a big closet, though. Yeah, it's one thing when you take players, for example, when you rent an Airbnb, you don't really know. It was crazy. We had that place in Orlando, and I could sleep 20, and we were sometimes 2 weekends a month renting an Airbnb in the Boca area. Crazy. Yeah, that's part of it too. I mean, to go off on a tangent, digress, for kids to be players, I mean, they need to be able to rough it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have a list, 33 things that we mentioned. We mentioned over 60 names as well, but I guess I should just mention number 1 is Javier Palenque, who has this podcast at USTA Solutions. We need to have him promoting what we're promoting is, and certainly not doing a good enough job with promotion, marketing 101. I need to start to hang out with Patrick Monigulu, is the show versus the sport. But Javier knows that we're really trying to, with tennis, make it more accessible, make it more affordable. Yeah, I think that, with Tiley, he should just call him right up and say, let's talk. I think a lot of times the people that are in their basement, and he's not necessarily doing that, but I mean, I think he'd love to be eyeball to eyeball and be in the office and meet, but I think you have to just address your critics right away. But
I'm not sure exactly as I read through there what the proposed solutions are to the problems. It sounds a lot of those articles, he goes through the numbers and the problems, but I don't really know if the solution is in a lot of those articles, but I could be wrong. Maybe you know more than I do on those, but I think it's the first thing. Okay, you can list a few things that are wrong, and then it's like, okay, what are your suggestions? What do you propose to do about it?
Solutions. Uncle Vic, we're also close to Uncle Vic, where one of our students one time wrote a letter. He was working for Vic in Europe and wrote about all the problems, and Vic wrote him back, said, I don't want a guy who's going to tell me about all the problems. Tell me about all the solutions. Let me read through these 30. We'll go from there. Andy, you could add to the list, but maybe we'll just have a little segment for Tap Tap, his nickname 100 years ago. Doubles, grips, attitude of the household, critics, documenting player development, accountability, which with that is supervisors, like kind of the tennis police, tennis camps, form tournament, target tournament, going back to technical photos showing the pros at contact point. If it was a video, showing the hitting zone of the pros. Certification, the whole alphabet soup with certification. And the USTA, he's coming in now. They're in that business. The Vic Braden course, continuing education, core information, Welby Van Horn balance method, Dennis Vandermeer. There's some add-ons with group dynamics, progressions, trickery, tournament organization, system of tournaments. Something I mentioned earlier, accessibility, affordability. Bill Jacobson, his contributions to tennis. Demographics, what was done with the Memphis Project. And certainly there's a film that captures that. Senior, junior matches, how people can donate time. Senior players can donate time. That needs to be reinvented. The veteran versus youth match. Ladders, backboards, how to deal with the bridge sports. College tennis, more Americans playing college tennis, freshmen. On campus, training of tennis teachers, peer teaching, school programs, parent education, biblical teaching, Don Meyer, charting. Of course, some of these connect. You could go back to Bill Jacobson, put charting with that. How to educate the consumer, high school tennis, and then early childhood development. It's a long list. It's all tied in with player development. Certainly his all-encompassing job at player development. That's the one lane that we're in with teachers, players, and parents. I picked out one to talk about, but go ahead, guys. Want to add something to it, Andy, because you weren't part of last week? Or?
Did you go through junior tennis much? I forget.
Yeah, player development in our world. I mean, we're really thinking junior tennis. I mean, it's the whole process. I know one of Craig's former employees, Craig Morris, has had a leadership role at the U State for some time, and I know Matt Clore, who's an insider to what we do. I know that Craig has talked to Matt about high level player development, and Matt's basically saying it's really all the same. Forehand's a forehand. Granted, how it's packaged, how it's presented. So yeah, I think it all ties in with junior tennis.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation this morning with my juniors doubles partner and then later college teammate Jordan Butler, who does a lot of visa work for several players on his tours, a lot of Russians especially. And we were just talking about kind of the good old days, not that I'm that old, but of how, you played locally in your area and then you played the big sectional tournaments. And then when you could do well there, then you qualified to be able to play in the nationals. And it was kind of a special thing, to make it to nationals and to play nationals or to even have a national ranking. And nowadays, where it's just all this, all these different levels and you've got to travel all over the place and just how much money it takes to really be up there because, the kids that are more fortunate and have the money to travel are able to get points and do all that. And just a shame that it's all just coming down to money. We started talking about the UTR and how, even to get in some of these UTR tournaments where you get guaranteed money and matches, kids be going, hey, I can't, or young players are going, hey, I can't lose this because, I got to try to protect my UTR so that I can qualify for these events where they get the automatic money and matches. And it's just too bad that it's, all of it, it's never going to, we were just saying it's never going to go away because of the money, that's involved that is now made. It's just too bad, that people can't blossom where they're planted and create maybe a really great tennis area where they are and then do the sectional and then national thing just to make it special again. To me, it's like, well, okay, if you're ranked 3,000 in juniors, nationally, okay, great. Like France does that where everybody's ranked, but it just made it feel or seem more special when you actually made it to nationals, when they were 128 draws.
No, thanks. A message that's been reinforced on these podcasts many, many times is Dave's theme for tennis to improve American tennis. Back to the future is go back to the good old days. It is unfortunate that kids are traveling. My whole thing, ITFs, idiots traveling foolishly. I think that's one good point of the UTR. I know there's many, but some kid is, they're in Guam or Barbados or an American kid and they're chasing points and you could tell just by their ITF and they're in the wrong place. That's part of success. Roger Federer, you got to be in the right place at the right time. You got to have the right coach at the right time. Yeah, well, let's just go through a few more things on this list. I know one I picked out was tennis camps, but Dave, you got a number or you want to pick one out? You don't even need a number. just reinforce a couple of these.
Can I touch on what Andy said there? Because in preparation for tonight, I made some notes as well, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, if there's one area that can be hugely influenced or have an incredible impact, it would be what Andy just said. Because to be your sectional champion used to carry a lot of weight, and as you know now, a lot of the top kids they're not even playing Easter Bowl anymore. The Easter Bowl's lost its sting. I mean, next it'll be the Orange Bowl, but for kids to have to do that, the junior tournament schedule is at the top of my list that I made, because again, living in the trenches, the topic of the title of last week, that has had such an adverse effect. And then I think Craig, who is an incredibly innovative human being, obviously, the USTA could start sectional tournaments rather, that are not influenced by UTR. These tournaments will stay out of the UTR somehow, so that we can get back to where it was 6 years ago, when I could tell a kid to go down the street to play, a decent tournament where he's going to get 3-4 matches. And I could tell him, hey, this tournament, you are working on serving and going on your first serve, regardless of outcome. And they could do that, and they gladly did it because it had no negative impact on their UTR. But those days are done. And so I think that, to me, if I had one wish, it would be that whole situation is going to be addressed. Hopefully under Craig's leadership, it'll be different, because history has shown me with the USTA, and they're very slow to admit that they've made a mistake. And the correction of the mistake often isn't really, it's another reinventing of a wheel, instead of maybe just going back to what it was.
One thing with Dave Howell, who made the study of the French system, and he pretty much did the homework, did the math, or the UTR. And Dave Fish is the one who launched it, the former Harvard coach. And I think on the end of the rainbow, when someone's through junior tennis and through college tennis, is a lot of kids are just banging golf balls. I think the PTT, I think that is something that reminds me of tennis in Europe, where it's not connected to the WTA or the ATP. It's like a kid going to France to play. But we have too many college kids who, they're good, but they're decided not to continue playing tennis. But there's just so many positives about the European. I know, Andy, you've been in Germany many years now. So yeah, I think it's what you said, the Wayne Bryan letter in the last podcast, people playing in their neighborhood. Andy touched upon that. But the PTTs, having money in it, it's trying to have players stay in the game longer. They're not finishing college. I think it's two things. Is that, there's no fluff. A lot of American kids are not getting to the college level, and then so how they start ECT, the early childhood development, not making it glorified babysitting, but actually teaching young kids to be athletes and develop ball striking skills. But I think the PTTs, that's something too that is a positive.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a number then, Andy. 1 through 33.
Let's go John Elway, number 7.
Number 7. Actually, this was in last week's podcast. Florian Meyer with, what's it called? Online tennis. Mm-hmm. Asked you, Andy, if you were the Braden police, and you said, yeah, I am.
I don't even remember what it was, but it was something that to do with Vic, and corrected him or something. And he said, what are you, the Vic Braden police? I said, yeah.
The USTA does have supervisors that travel around the country and evaluate umpires. But I think that if the USTA was really strong with fact-based instruction, it's hard to argue with, the Bradenism, dimensions, court, and physical laws. But it's accountability. What comes to your mind with player development, the new USTA under the new CEO, accountability?
It happens. I mean, I just saw Craig at the Indian Wells tournament, a week or two ago, and I actually came up behind him and grabbed him by the shoulders, and I said, Tiley, how in the heck did you become the CEO of the USTA? I congratulated him, and I would think he would take some of his past experience in player development and try to implement it. That's what I would hope for. He's definitely he's done his time, he's paid his dues and all that. But going back to his successes, usually people will study success. So it's like, okay, well, what did he do? Hopefully people will take a close look at that because, it's not really, I think, something that's known in all tennis circles. And, it's like, okay, let's look at this pathway. And so hopefully he can introduce that. I know he did introduce some of the concepts to Tennis Australia because I still have the videos that were produced. Yeah. Where he went through the concepts. I show those quite often. I mean, they were well done, and obviously you get to use the footage from the Australian Open, so it helps to see the top players in the world doing those things.
Those are quite old because I know Sampras, how he would move through a volley. Yeah, was it called Tennis 2000? I remember that.
There's a site or something that still has them up. They're hard to find, but I think if you do a little search in YouTube,
well, Tiley,
they'll pop up.
Tiley, within our network, certainly people will send me, that's just the way it is right now. So I wasn't too long ago where Tiley was interviewed, said I as from a coaching standpoint, he goes, I just worked with people's strengths. And I have 16 hours of Tiley. I have a lot more than that, but I have 16 hours, a place where I went over in Japan, tennis training center. So, Craig had good ink, and he was, the team was climbing at Illinois, and, through the connections we had in Tyler, Texas, where we worked with people like John Lavdiaga, they were juniors, Jeff Coetzee. So Tiley became the Davis Cup captain. But so I have 16 hours of the Illinois kids shadow swinging and drop hitting balls. And when he won, Ryler DeHart didn't play. Chris Martin played 6 when they won the NCAAs. If DeHart had played, and he played quite a few matches, pretty interesting. He had all one-handers, but he got people to go forward. So he was very, very successful. He took a team from obscurity and they won the national title, but information had a lot to do with that. We talked about it last week that he taught a class. He was just getting speaking skills, and Anderson, you were there. We coached on an interbase, and the three of us coached a team together. He taught a class on team coaching. Jim Burdick, one of our pillars. But there's so much of it. But and he's so not removed from it, but he's got so many things on his plate. I have no idea as to where that's just way above my pay grade. But I think go back to the trenches. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's kind of like when you first see something, like we always talk about the arrow and the FedEx logo, right? And the same as in tennis teaching. Well, once you see something, let's just say like the, tucking of the arm on the serve, because I've had coaches in the past say, well, Andy Murray doesn't do that. And I said, of course he does. You got to watch it in slow motion, and then once they see it, they'll never unsee it. And Tiley's had that in his background where he knows some things like, okay, this is this. And so you would hope that he would have that standard, right? That Vic Braden advice where never lower your standards, that he would be able to set those standards and then hold people accountable to it. But it's the same old mix. I mean, the Bryan brothers, again, in Indian Wells, was able to talk to Mike a little bit about, mindset and mentality going into 10-point tiebreakers and doubles, because my guys have lost, every match this year in a 10-pointer. Every match they've lost in 10-pointer. But at the same time, you get guys in those power positions, those, high-profile players where they're teaching. And, the Bryans will say, continental grip on the volley, but they don't have a continental grip on the volley. but though they're the people in those positions that are going to be running, doubles camps for the USGA, or people are going to look to them for that type of information. But, details are needed. And so it's a tough situation where the players being the power brokers in tennis, and, Tiley knows them all, and then being able to come back around and go, okay, let's really take this to another level.
Well,
and then set that standard and be accountable to it. That's, I hope that happens.
I said this for a long time in tennis teaching. Diplomacy can kill time. It's like, well, we'll let that slide. Pretty soon we have an avalanche. One of our juniors years ago was approached by a national coach and was told to lead in with the bottom edge of the racket and, open racket face. And the junior said, I'm not doing that on a ball above the level net. Have you ever seen Sampras volley? But then, someone like Mats Wilander, who I really respect, it maybe could have been Jim Courier, but one of the top players, broadcaster, said, you'll never see someone volley like that again. Well, you could be the wise guy and say, well, we may never see anyone volley again. But that it all has to start early. And the Bryan brothers, the history. Matt closed in a meeting where they're talking about who are the leading developmental coaches in the U.S. and Manny Diaz's son. Is it Eric? His name came up, and Matt said, "Well, the coaching tree," and they, to trace it back to Manny being taught by Welby Van Horn, and again, I'm 100,000 feet up, but Eric Diaz, when he's interviewed many times, he's used. You can count the number of times he uses the word balance. Pretty interesting. But Matt is the one who said, "Hey, those." I told him the films. It's pretty powerful. This group that won the NCAAs, but even people would say, "Well, that's outdated." I mean, the laws of physics are not outdated. But I think the use of film to show, again, as I mentioned, the contact point and the hitting zone. But
100%. I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say we recently dealt with that. I mean, where you asked me to take a look at some things, and you get into those comment sections, social media, or whatever it is, and it just gets ugly. It's like you just get lost, and it becomes a waste of time because it's not that difficult to just find video of super slow motion these days, and you can see exactly what's happening at and around contact. But people still muck it up.
Yeah, even if you use the word nearly vertical,
Yeah, I mean, it's just it just all comes down to how you, with the art of coaching, how you get somebody to do that. You can tell some 12-year-old kid to close the racket face 2 degrees, or even a pro player. It's just kind of ridiculous stuff.
Yeah. But accountability is, what are people doing with their time? And it's simple things like not starting a lesson with a forehand all the time. How much time did they just Braden used to hate it when people would go, they were just going across the baseline hitting forehands. But people wouldn't really know that unless they were in the back room with Vic, because his style was certainly not to be confrontational and go, hey,
Yeah. Well, that's where it's okay if we're talking about player development at higher levels. It should be all video. Should all be documented. Okay, what are you working on? Let's document it. Let's track the progress using video, because that's the only way. You're not going to track it based on your feeling. How are you feeling on your forehand today? No, it's like, let's take a look. Okay, a couple months ago you had this flaw or this inefficiency, and now let's look what progress you've made.
Just the other day I put a film up of a girl I know that you both have worked with her, and she's doing quite well. I mean, she has a very good technical base, but when we show that, people, it's just showing a technical base. Andres Barbosa was asking me about Patrick Gibson. He just beat Demonauer, number 6 in the world. And I said, yeah, I've got all sorts of film with Patrick, right-handed, left-handed. He used to have him play with his opposite hand all the time because he's so competitive. That's it for our listeners. That's a good trick. If you have a junior who's a little bit flat, we've talked about that, where you say, well, 40 love lead or the BIS system from the French Tennis Federation. But say, okay, let's see you beat this player playing with your opposite hand. Dave, give me a number.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are picking all the good numbers and topics. Got a lot of notes. Got a lot of notes on whatever number we just picked.
Accountability. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Stay on that.
Well, no, it was. There's so many layers to Craig's job. I don't even know. I mean, I've only served on boards, right? And I felt like to get something done on a board took just an act of God to be able to get anything moved around to a better place on just one board for the high performance board for Texas tennis. So I can't imagine what he's up against. But when it comes to player development, which was the topic a moment ago, to me, and it's not out of trying to polarize a student I have or anything. It's just, I've never understood, this person riding in on a white horse, rescuing people by bringing them either to Carson or to Lake Nona. And when you have people that are, understanding the human being they're working with, developing them, having successes, and then to have them yanked out of your hands. I mean, that's not really a great formula for creating, just a sound relationship with the people in the trenches and USTA. But I've always believed that there could be a better job done with funding regionally. Person in each region doesn't even have to be section; it could be regions that are, able to continue building the people, and the USTA does a better job of helping fund it. I mean, because you guys have done it just like me, where you put in a lot of, I would say the majority of the hours you put in are pro bono with players that do get down the road pretty far. Then traveling and then travel coaching and all of those things. But in order for us to receive that benefit, we have to play the game and we have to kiss the ring. And I'm not a huge fan of that. And I think that it's a very easy change that could happen. But again, I mean, if Wayne Bryan can't move that needle, I don't know who can.
Yeah. Well, but, Patrick McEnroe certainly has a number of, just his playing background, now with commentating. I mean, obviously he's a great presenter, but he doesn't have Tiley's background.
No.
And certainly, he was just a general manager of player development. He wasn't the CEO. How about this one? The high performance course. Andy, I know you and I are graduates of that, but do you think that would help Dave Anderson if he were to go through that?
Depends on what kind of help. Stress relief or
comedy.
Comedy, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it should be done. It should be done, though. You need to be in that room and be able to chirp a little bit.
Yeah,
it needs to be done.
I went through it. I have to admit that it was during the Australian Open, and I stayed up late watching. Got caught sleeping in class a couple times, but I went through it. But I think that's where you put so many of these things together, like say the Vic Braden course, fact-based instruction. People, it's like with Vic. I remember one time they came to his academy, the USTA, United States Tennis Academy, and then Vic gave that name, that acronym, to the USTA. So a gentleman wanted to know if he was going to get a refund because he missed the first half of the first day, and Vic asked him, question. He said, "Have you read this book?" And then Vic he told the group, he goes, "I couldn't imagine coming to this class if you hadn't read the book first." But again, that book will never be outdated. Tiley knows that too. He knows that. So no, he can't come in and crack the whip, and he's got to certainly make a study. I mean, Matt Clure, for example, it's a monster. The USTA, 17 sections. I mean, wow! It's not just Lake Nona. It's a big operation. It's a governing body of American tennis.
Yeah, and the biggest cash cow is the U.S. Open, so that's where I know that's probably the highest priority.
Yeah, $800 million renovating Flushing Meadows, and that's follow the money. But when they talk about, and that's coming back to Javier Palenque. Tiley was interviewed, said there's 27 million people playing in the United States. there's always been critics for that. It's like, where do you come up with that number based on, the number of tennis ball cans sold? But, I see lots of empty tennis courts, and that's where Javier is coming from. But I also think too is, you shouldn't have to join a club, be a member, take $100 lessons. Back in the day, the Swedes, I went to Sweden to study tennis where they had 10,000 animators. We need to go back and, okay, there's a ready position, there's a unit turn. Kids should be able to learn tennis in their driveway. That's one of the visions of the GreatBase is, let's make tennis happen. And I think they make it clever too, where you incorporate it with other sports. I saw Thomas Olestead, was a classmate of Dave's, and Craig came in at the same time. And for K-Swiss, I was asked years ago, because they, Scott Nunn, someone who Tomas was really good friends with, and they had a very successful adult league. And, nothing became of it, but they asked me to put some pen to paper, and, I came up with, it was like the tennis-a-thon, where there was 10 events with prizes, and, tracing the swing, mimicking, posters. It never got launched, but, that's the one thing about our sport, the degree of difficulty, it's pretty bad. I mean, I was with a group of kids the other day, and certainly I'm not too skilled in teaching people how to play basketball, but, dribbling basketballs in and out of cones and such, but making kids athletic. Because most junior tennis lessons, the consumer is not educated, and it's glorified babysitting. And it's like Vic used to say, why don't you shut up and teach them how to hit it? But a lot of people don't know Vic, past tense. They didn't know Vic that way. But behind closed doors, he goes, oh my word, that's not a tennis lesson. No learning's taking place. Okay, Andy, give me a number.
Yeah.
Just do a couple more of these.
11.
Talk about doubles here. Yeah, I know you do this all the time. Is showing pros in slow motion. We talked about my office last week for many years ago, where we have photos, and you just show them right at the impact point, or like a Vilas, a Lendl. But yeah, your thoughts on showing slow motion and being more powerful with how we show the American public or worldwide how people honor physics when they play. They can't violate physical laws.
Yeah, so important to do it. I mean, like you, I get sent things all the time. Hey, check out this or what this person said online or whatnot, and it always just cracks me up about how when people talk about things after contact, it's just like the only reason why you want to have the racket track out to target a little bit on a forehand or backhand volley, let's say, is just in case your timing is off. If you're a little early, you're going to be good. But someone sent me one just the other day, and it was a girl in Europe, and she's teaching the forehand. She said, and then you got to be loose, and then after contact, she literally said after contact, so you can make this windshield wiper motion. And it's like, well, what's that going to do but give you a wrist injury? Over time, over repetition, some forced windshield wiper move after contact. It's crazy. So that's where the pros come in, where obviously people are going to look up to their heroes. And then if you can just show them doing the things that you're trying to get them to do or teach them, then it's just so powerful.
Well, one thing with Vic, I love this. Are you going to teach what's happening or what's happened? And you can ask people that and just think about that for a minute. You want to teach what's happening or what's happened? And the ball's gone. It's like the famous Brian Godfrey video where what a class act, what a hard worker, gets to be high 3 in the world. And Vic had him on film. Well, why are you turning the racket under? And many times it's just racket displacement after the hit. He goes, well, I drive through and I do this to put bite on the ball and keep the ball in play. And by the time he turns the racket underneath, the ball is 14 feet away, going in the other direction.
Yeah, that's the whole based on, feel. You just don't feel it, until after the ball's well gone. So
yeah, it feels aftershock.
Yeah, I mean,
I was I was Lake Nona a week ago for 5 days, 5 long days watching people play tennis. And I'm really proud of my name. Vic used to call me the Observer's Observer. And I have a pretty good idea of how tennis is being taught. And it's like, uh-oh. People hear that and they think, well, we're arrogant but it's our game. It's a beautiful game. And as Dave says, it needs big help. So yeah, the accountability is that are you really telling people this is what their child needs to do to learn to hit the ball better? Because if they don't, juniors, if they're not improving, they're gonna find something else to do. We're gonna lose people. That's a big thing is people don't stay with the sport.
100%. I mean, it's so difficult the sport. I mean, technically, that it takes time and it's a long journey to really be able to rally well and enjoy the game. So if you get a bad start, it doesn't help.
Braden, no such thing as no substitute for a good start. Yeah, we can go through a few more of these. Let's touch upon what you're doing with doubles as well, Andy. I know you're on your way to Miami. Dave, give us another number.
Yeah. 4.
Bobby Orr. Attitude of the household. Go ahead, Dave.
I knew that was 4.
Bobby Orr, baby.
Everybody clear out the next 5 hours of your life for attitude of the household. No, I think it's critical. Again, I'll get back to attitude of the household, but I ran into, Steve Campbell out there and he showed me his app, and it's a pretty impressive thing he's working on. And he showed me his 3D renderings of the strokes and all that. And I said, if I were you, the only thing I would add to that, I said, I think it's great. But I said, I would have a stage development rendering and show some modern footage of Alcaraz or Sevicorda or Muhova or some, and use some of these players today because, I don't think many weeks go by I don't show Jim Lair's 16-second Kier because I think it's one of the best 30-minute videos out there on YouTube. And I think it can save families $15,000 in sports psychology fees. But the problem is when I put it on the TV, that this generation that I'm working with anyways, and I'm sure you're feeling the same things, they have trouble getting past the tennis shorts that are, look like tighty-whitey underwear and the mullets, and they have trouble getting past all of that to hear the substance of the information. And so I think I mean, it would be great if we could have everybody holding a racket or coaching the game in a room, and we could show the exact moments that these players are honoring the physics and that they're replicating things that we're trying to get people to do inside of the GreatBase, and why some of them maybe who aren't really effective in it, why they crack, why they break down. And because I think people have trouble associating it with the players that they're watching on television now, even though we watch them and we see traces of everything that we're trying to teach. And the connection isn't made there. Going back to what I think was the best name, the tennis connection. I don't think they're making the connection. But yeah, just a thought on that. Attitude of the household, I mean, I think it's everything. Before I got on to do the podcast tonight, I heard my son-in-law get my dad's tone of voice and, tell his 2 boys, look him dead in the eyes when he's talking to him. And I don't think that happens much anymore. I think parents have become buddies. I think I get that. I was a pretty weak parent. My wife was a hammer. But that right there, that moment I witnessed 10 minutes before getting on the phone with you guys, just doesn't happen much. We as coaches, I always tell parents, I'll be as accountable. My accountability to your child's tennis will be relative to the amount of control I'm giving. And you can't hold me 100% accountable when you're giving me, 42% control of the things I need to do in order to make success happen. And so I think that the attitude of the household, again, I wrote that down actually because in regard to Craig Tiley and his mission, I think it's going to have to be very, when player development is just too vague to me, I think it's got to be coach development, it's got to be parent development, player development, and then there's like 8 subtitles under that because there's so many stages, So to me, attitude of the household is everything. And sometimes I'd rather have a non-athletic family in this day and time. I want an athlete for a kid, but sometimes there's no winning formula that I'm discovering for what the parents did or didn't do. I always think of Vince Spadia, Steve, and seeing his mother and father, and they certainly didn't look like they would kick out 3 kids that produced the kind of results they produced.
Yeah, Vince got to be 19 in the world. I mean, he's tough tennis. He one time lost 19 times in a row in the first round, but 19 in the world, a great tennis player. He was great before you and I worked with him.
Yeah.
Briefly, but I can never forget we were working on this, that, and the other thing, and I still have that on film. And he wins the Orange Bowl, and Stan Smith comes by, and we really never saw him after that. But Steve Campbell, just for our listeners, he's a former tennis techer. Tennis Tech is a program we ran for tennis teachers throughout the 80s. Let me say this, stage development, you mentioned that many times. Paul Roeder, years ago, Rob Krychek made that happen. So we had 3 meetings. The first one was just with Paul. It was 5 hours. And I do what I do. I mean, I don't feel like I was rocking the boat. To digress, one time an academic dean said to me, "Steve, I think you're rocking the boat." I said, "I can't. The boat's underwater." But anyway, the USTA had this huge poster, and it was everywhere in America. And I remember Paul wrote, a really nice guy. I said, "Paul, I hate to know what the USTA spent on that poster, but it was stage development." And I said, "Just look at the photos." And, someone like a Welby Van Horn or Vic Braden, they would just cringe looking at the photos. Like this is how you teach at this stage. This is how you teach at this stage. But what you just said is there is a connection. But, you just have to listen. I don't know Michael Joyce from The Man in the Moon. I remember watching him play. I remember meeting with the owner of the club where he grew up. And I turned down the opportunity to go work there. But I listened to Michael Joyce on a podcast, and he's talking, he's working with some, beginners. So he mentioned, 15, 16-year-olds that are really good players. It's all relative. So in his world, that is a beginner. If you've been coaching Maria Sharapova, some 16-year-old kid's a beginner. But I'm talking, day one when someone first picks a racket up. Let me just say this. This is great for perspective. I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York, Hicks and Slicks, and there's New York City. And my oldest brother was with the New York Rangers as an assistant coach. I remember talking to the secretaries. And the question is, how many people live in a small town? Well, if you're from New York City, you think that perhaps Syracuse or Rochester are small towns. To me, a small town is 2,000 people. So it's all about putting things in perspective. Here's perspective coming back to the attitude of the household. An amazing video just caught my attention. Is this girl from the Ukraine, actually, Joey Scrivano from Baylor sent it to me. And, it's a 15-year-old girl. Her UTR, I guess, is not high enough to be on Baylor's recruiting list. But this girl's playing on a wooden court. I mean, the net is just flimsy. And the baseline is like 3 feet from the wall. The ladder on the court is taped down. It's not, fancy commercial product, but you can play tennis everywhere. You don't need a fancy club. We need to get kids playing, learning how to play in, say, a backyard. How do you swing the racket? Tennis is, and the people need to really push tennis as a lifetime sport. But it's a very difficult sport to get people to play, especially now. That was on the list. Is the bridge sport is how to combat people not trying baseball or softball and just going right to wiffle ball, and that's pickleball. Pickleball represents American society. It's instant gratification. It's microwave a sport. Let's go a couple more. Andy, give me a number.
No, I was going to say, just to touch upon all, the attitude of the household and talking about these different players. And there's a kid, I just saw him recently here in Phoenix at the Challenger. And the first time I saw him was when I was coaching Henry Squire. He's from Great Britain. His name is Billy Harris. And he's cracked, very close to cracking the top 100. I think he might have been like 101 or something. Monster of a kid. I mean, built his body. I mean, he's a big, strong kid. But I just remember, at the time, he's probably, I don't even know if he was top 400, but right around between 300 and 400 or 500 even. And I just watched him practice and just kind of observed him through the days. And he just seemed to have, some humility about him, hard work. And I mean, I was like, I don't like this kid, and strokes were still kind of, raw, but I just saw him here in Phoenix and there's a backboard there. And I thought, man, is anyone ever going to, use that backboard? I'm always taking pictures of backboards and saying, where there's a wall, there's a way. And I had JJ Tracy, do a few volleys off the backboard. I said, hey, this is at a slant. You can come over here and just hit a bunch of backhand volleys, over and over and over. He did it for a couple minutes, and then, but sure enough, this kid, Billy Harris, rocks up and he's warming up, but he started hitting on the backboard. And I was like, I knew it, this kid, just character. And you just know it all comes down to that. With parenting, he's coached by his dad, but he traveled in his van for like 3.5 years across Europe, sleeping in his van and cooking meals on the roadside. He says, that's the kind of kid I want to coach,
Mm-hmm.
Pretty neat story. But it, like Dave said, it all comes down to parenting, and then, school teachers too, spending so much time with kids. I was talking to my nephew and he's telling me about, how his classrooms are. And it's basically it's just a brain drain. It's a waste of time. I mean, obviously he's just 14, but, the power of a school teacher. And then that just goes down to the coaches, as well. It's like we really do hold sacred positions to help these kids. But like Dave said, if you only have a certain amount of permission to pound, it makes it tough. But for me, I mean, just looking at just the world in general, there's with the youth, it's harder and harder to find kids with humility and hard work, and just even the words like civility and reverence, just everything that you see politically and everything going in the world. It's crazy. So it definitely does start in the household.
Andy, let me ask you. You mentioned you started
going on a rant.
No, that's that's great. That's
just
great.
Reminded me of this kid, Billy Harris. I just thought, man, I would love to help. That's the kind of kid, like, I would just coach him for free. Because you just know he would love the information and take it and use it. It just feels like you're trying to pull teeth just to get somebody to saddle swing. It's like, I'm showing you how to get better. Just take it and use it. But you got to work it.
Let me go back. You said there was a backboard, or a regular backboard that's slanted backwards?
Yeah, it was just a backboard at this tournament, right? Kind of in the middle of these two courts. And I went out early. It's like, I want to hit this backboard for a minute. And I just thought, no one's going to use this thing, unfortunately. And then I had JJ Trace on there for a couple minutes. I would say, hey, find a backboard and you could do this drill. Just practice low backhand volleys and swing this way. But sure enough, this kid Billy was over there hitting the backboard a little bit.
With backboards, for our listeners, if it's tilted back at 15 degrees, it's much better for your volley. What happens with backboard, as Andy says, is straight up and down, and the players will tilt their racket face. Coming back to backboards, there was a photo years ago. John McEnroe, Indian Wells, was sitting between Larry Ellison and Bill Gates. And I said, I would love to talk to those two guys. And because they love tennis. And that's one thing about the GreatBase backboard. That's just a labor of love. I only lost a little bit of money in putting that project together. Someone still wanted a GreatBase backboard. I mean, I can connect them with Andrew Garcia. Within the first year, 6 people made something that was very similar just in the U.S. And then, I was actually in Dusseldorf and went to Holland and saw, because I told this German kid, hey, we'll drive down there, and he bought a backboard and went with his mother. And the gentleman tried to tell me it was his invention. It was like just just like the original one that, we're not the mastermind behind it. But no, I think it's someone like Tiley. I mean, he certainly could get in front of a Larry Ellison and a Bill Gates. And I know one time the Swedish Tennis Federation, the Finnish Federation, had the top juniors using those portable backboards. I know Dave's got probably a dozen of them. I donated some to this college, and people will only use them if they're told to use them. So, yeah, that story about Billy Harris. But the tennis world is such a small place. I know, like David Squire, Henry was sent to me when he was 6, and he spent so much time with Mark Hamlin. I know you spent a lot of time with him, and his dad's Aussie, and he had the chance to actually be paid by Tennis Australia, but he grew up in Germany. Kimberly Burrell, I mean, she's the highest ranked Aussie right now on the women's side. I think there's a lot of teaching pros that follow the GreatBase, but her father certainly was someone who respected what we were trying to do with the GreatBase. Correct, Andy? I know you coached her for a long time.
Yeah, no, for sure, yeah.
Whose turn is it? Let's go a couple more, then we'll go to doubles. Andy can enlighten us about the world of doubles. Go ahead, Dave. Another number, or is it Andy's turn?
I think Andy was on doubles or something, and then he sidetracked into attitude of the household, and then
I just wanted to touch on that, but I don't know what the question was before that.
Well, let's go with doubles.
I think you were going to pick a number, yeah.
How about
doubles?
Number 2, Andy, doubles. Ed Crass is someone who we're very close to, and I appreciate him about giving us some kind words. A shout out with the late Bobby Curtis. I met with Bobby and said, hey, you got to have this be sanctioned, and it really needs more support. It's a great tagline. It's ghost doubles, it's cross-court doubles, it's one-on-one. Tommy Haas told Ed at one time to have players stay back. I thought it was for 2 years, but he just did that for 1 year. But it's mandatory. If you don't go to the net, you lose the point. I told him, I just spent some time with him. We took some players to an event, and I said, I don't really like the idea that you get 2 points for hitting a winner on the volley because they're coming in and trying to slap the volley. I said, if they could just make the first volley and then go from there. But to have a blended line, have all the other lines, the 10-under lines, the pickleball lines. I know people complain about it, but the tagline is tennis's third game. So there's singles and there's doubles and there's ghost doubles. Yes, Dave says it very strongly, is doubles needs to be saved. But Andy, I know you're traveling the world now. Your team last year got out to the semifinals of the US Open. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on doubles.
Well, last few months, the scoring system has become frustrating. Just because the guys have been in positions to win, and it's really can be fluke shots or just not being able to execute 1 or 2 points, and you could be the better team for the entire match, and the last 5 minutes go not your way, you're done. You're packing your bags. So it's unfortunate. Again, back to the future. I wish they would just go back to normal scoring. I mean, the points are faster for the most part anyway, compared to a singles match. Just go back to the regular scoring and play a third set. I know it makes it somewhat exciting for the fans maybe, but it's really brutal to try to make a living, with the modified scoring system. It's almost a coin toss, really, because everybody's good. And when somebody gets that break, I mean, it's tough. So that's been on my mind quite a bit. Yeah, I think the idea with the one bounce doubles and all those kind of things, tournaments would be fun, I think, to play those, and that would definitely help it. But again, back to the junior tennis stuff, it's hard to find tournaments where they even play doubles, or you'd have to try to make it like the ITF, make it count towards a singles ranking to play doubles, to get more people playing it.
Oh, and they're charging too much money. I mean, it used to be nominal, maybe $5 more if you played the doubles.
Right.
It's just $5 more from the singles. Yeah, the scoring system, college tennis, playing to 6. You never convinced me that they should do that. At least play to 8. And
that's when I played. It was 8, but even then, it was like, oh, really? You're playing to 8?
And for years and years, the college coaches didn't complain about no ad because they could play more than 25 days. And, if they go about and have double headers, so you can go back and forth. I know Eric Buterak's mixed doubles last year at the U.S. Open was really exciting. I think it was a sign from up above that the only mixed doubles team in the special event won the special event. And I remember people running that a long time ago just for some fun, is have a 1 point draw, and just go through it very quickly. So, but those type of things are fun for tennis, but they're really helping develop the game. So there is going back to Javier Palenque, the show versus the sport.
Well, and you say the show versus, I may be wrong on this, but I got online to check it. Indian Wells had the mixed doubles kind of following the U.S. Open's lead on that, and the winning team, I believe, split $1 million. And it was a shortened event, didn't begin really till the latter part of the tournament, where the winning doubles teams, I believe, split $680, maybe $700. So the doubles events didn't actually even get the same financial rewards. Yeah, and I'm going to check right when we get off air to make sure I'm correct. But I looked at it once, and it kind of shocked me.
And it's really just it's that extra kind of.
It's the show.
It's the show, and you're not getting the players that actually need the money. To the invitation kind of stuff, and that's why the U.S. Open. I mean, you could do those little show exhibitions as well, but don't take away the real thing. And for the players that are trying to feed their families,
So Bencic and Caboli left with 700,000+ between singles, doubles, and the winning doubles team, Townsend and them left with under 300, I believe, apiece.
So let me get this right, David. The mix that was a bigger purse than the doubles.
The doubles, by a significant amount.
To digress, I was watching a little bit of that with some juniors and some coaches, and Bencic, the way she serves, it doesn't have a continuous motion, but you get into her brain type, and she's got a smile on her face, and she can compete. Growing up in beautiful Switzerland, she's an immigrant. Her father was a hockey player. Caboli, first time I saw him play several years ago, I said, no doubt that kid plays great soccer. Got on the line and found him, playing a little bit of soccer. But that's digressing, but because I do think that people, there's, three parts of the tennis player: from the neck up, from the neck to the waist, and the waist down. And when people come to see me, we spend so much time on the second part. Just because their grips and their swings, I mean, their limbs are going everywhere. If it was swimming and you didn't know anything about swimming, the person looks like they're drowning. And very much many tennis players, that's the way they look. I mean, they don't know that, but if you have a technical eye and efficient from inefficient, but here we go. Let's go a couple more. Davey, baby.
Number 10. Did I say that yet? I don't think so. I think I went with 4. 4 and 10. Those were my numbers growing up.
Yeah, this is the target tournament. Hitting balls to a target. Vic Braden. Hitting targets. We go running, hitting targets with a score. But target tournament. We have the tournament, the quadrant tournament. What comes to your mind?
Well, I'll say one thing about, one thing I was proud of that worked. Whether it worked or not, I don't know. But back in East Texas, it was part of our tennis connection, and I'd run this Grand Prix circuit for unqualified players. That meant they were in what we called Zats back then, or regulars, because there were Zats, champs, and supers. So the unqualified kids were, perceived as the bottom of the barrel. So at the halfway point on Saturday in the tournament, no matter where the matches were, a whistle would blow and then all play would stop. And we would resume and they'd get warmed up and that, but we had educational seminar. And it's kind of along the lines of the target tournament. We'd have a demonstration, or we'd talk about mental emotional skills, and parents and kids, whether they were, it was a captive audience, and these weren't governed. I didn't sanction these on purpose with the USTA. They weren't in the books. I didn't send in the sanction fees or anything because I wanted to try to experiment with that. And I think that the form tournaments, they need to happen inside of training environments, but each environment, unfortunately tends to be dictated by the best player. And so, the culture of the program has a lot to do with that. It's not hard for us to pull a kid like Mason or Marco or, somebody like that out and have them hit on balance, and then the little kids see it. But, sometimes we'll get a player in who has no background in it, and to pull it off with a bunch of, I think it's like everything to me. When Andy said doubles, or when we think about form tournaments or any of these problems, I know they trickle down from the top, but I think that tennis is at a point where everything needs to start at the bottom right now and rebuild upward, because I think it's so far gone the other way. I think it's just too far gone from the top down. I think it's got to be bottom up. And form tournaments are part of that bottom up.
Here's a story. Vic Braden spending so much time in California. He was Fat Albert before Bill Cosby was Fat Albert. He's referred to himself as Fat Albert. So there's a situation where they asked Vic to help entertain the crowd, and the court was still wet, but you couldn't really play on the court. But you could have a ball be fed to you and just be in one place. And so they brought Vic down like a professional comedian, and they had some of the top players in the world on the court, and you had to hit balls to the target. And Vic used to tell a story, Fat Albert, he was hitting, he knew to elevate the ball, and that's just a fun story. That there was no running; it was just a standstill shot, and it's kind of like the kid who can just nail foul shot after foul shot. That doesn't mean that they're going to play big time college basketball or the NBA, but they can. I love that expression. They can make the shot. But no, I think what precedes target tournaments is form tournaments, and I think that's where this whole thing with Dennis Vandermeer and trickery and posters, and just like say, okay, here's Serena, in that comb the hair position. I was sent something today. It's a photo of Federer in 1999, 2009, and 2019, and it just shows how he has the racket face closed a little bit more. On the serve, at the top of the swing, but just it just works like a charm. Little kids want prizes. Can you hold your balance? And I think we're too quick to say, okay, let's make it a game. But I think that's where something has really hurt tennis over the years is game-based training. It needs to be form-based training and game-based training combined, and call it principle-based. And you can reward kids for, being obedient, cooperative skills, tennis skills, athletic skills, and a little kid lesson. And they have to be responsible. I mean, this is how you swing. And it's all brain memory. So if they don't, they're developing instincts. It's like it's just sad, I mean, I had these girls today playing, doing a ghost doubles drill, just serve, volley, hit an overhead. It's those three things. Serve, volley, hit an overhead. But don't try to win the point. Let's make it, with the person on the other side, can you hit 5 balls? And start from the very beginning, develop those instincts to go forward.
Yeah, exactly. I think, with the target tournament, one thing that would work well is if you use a ball machine, and then, you start at, let's say, level 1, where instead of, an easy feed or whatever, then you can, move up with speed and spin on the ball machine as well, and progress that way. See how many you make out of 10 from this speed or spin, and then crank it up every level, and then the last person standing will obviously have the best skills.
I had a young gymnast tell me last week, as far as competing. She goes, no, I need to go up one more level. And I said, well, how long is that going to take? She said, probably a year. That comes back to in the United States at one time, you couldn't be a ranked player till you were 13. So, can you run? Can you throw? Can you catch? But I think, I know David jumped all over it with parent education. If the parent doesn't know, like you can't totally trust the red brick building, get involved with the PTA and is learning taking place. In New York State years ago, one thing that was really good for the education system is there was the Regents exam. So the teacher was being tested. So everybody in the entire state would take the same algebra test. The entire state, everybody would take the same geometry test. And, if your students were all flunking the test, you weren't doing a very, very good job teaching.
Right.
Tell us, Andy, what's going on getting ready for Miami? What do your players need to do to get better? Let's touch upon that and we'll call it a day. But we could wrap it up on the tap, Craig Tiley, player development. No telling how long his list is with everything else, that all-encompassing challenge. But
yeah, no, on my way to Miami Tuesday morning here, Sunday as we're talking now, and I've asked for feedback from several different people, Dave Anderson being one. Most of the feedback is they're right there in a position to win, and you just got to keep chipping away. We had a meeting in Indian Wells, and because I hadn't seen him in probably over a month since Australia, and you got two different personalities, but I watched a bunch of Nick Saban videos. That's where I was talking about that. Setting a standard was something he was big into, and then you can coach to that standard. And so we talked a lot about that, as to say what are certain standards that we can all agree upon, and then we can all give each other a hard time about it. I mean, even this last tournament, a lot of these tournaments, they have these candy jars out. They just put it right in front of you. The quick dopamine hit. I was going for a couple of those, and Rob started going, nope, and but yeah, they just got to keep chipping away with basics, and the message I wrote to him this last tournament, because we got a couple of days apart here, was just life's going to happen, things are going to happen, and the important thing is how are you going to respond. It's like, okay, he lost another close one, 10-8 in the third against a good team, and had chances to win, but okay, how are you going to respond? You got Miami coming up, and let's get back to work, and hungry dog hunts best, and so that's the plan. You just keep going.
That's good. Go ahead, Dave.
I remember years ago asking, I can't remember even who it was, if they had any data on how it was affecting the top teams, the scoring system. And I think it might have actually been Wayne Bryan. I don't know though. And they said it didn't have that big of an impact. And I think that might have been true then. I don't think it's true now. I'd like to see data on it, because I do believe that there's a lot of teams out there who, they're playing the majors events, the thousands, the 500s, the slams, and some of them are just roasting returns, right? And I think through the course of a true 3-set match, especially if you weren't to play no ad, I think the better skills win out more often than not on that, where now I think it's much, much more of a crapshoot. And I mean, every day, that's one of the first things I do is just check it, which I know Andy does at a much more thorough level. But it's just fascinating to me how many times I'm looking at 12-10, 10-8, 10-7.
Yeah.
It's just, and you talk about having to have mental toughness and perseverance. And that's why I hated to see that thing about the mixed doubles prize money, because those guys that are out there playing doubles, they're phenomenal. I think the crowds love them. I think it's so fun to watch. My wife, who is, probably one of the best non-paid playing professionals at the 3-5 level, she really enjoys the doubles. And I think everybody does that's in her situation. So, tying it in with Tiley and the USTA, even if Tiley weren't there, we have to grow the sport. I think so much attention is given to the best part of tennis. The people that are, at a high level, and whether it's pro players or good juniors or something in between. And I think we got to get more attention given to people that we got to get more rackets in people's hands, and that's where a lot of talk and a lot of focus and a lot of help is really needed from all of us.
Now, let me add a little bit to that. Thank you. Welby Van Horn used to always ask people, he'd meet somebody and say, hey, how do you think you develop a tennis mind? Nick Saban, the word system, somebody I couldn't think of his name last week is Craig Jones. I don't know Craig Jones, but I was at one of those functions I mentioned where I know you've done it, Dave. Andy, I'm not sure if you have, where you've been more on the pro level, but they fly in junior coaches, USTA. I remember one time it was pretty nice. They gave me a hotel room for 2 weeks. I wasn't going to be there for 2 weeks, but that's kind of nice, guys. So anyway, I was introduced to Greg. I said, Greg, I've listened to you speak 3 different times. And at that time, Scott Schultz was talking to me, and he started Ferris State. And Greg, just bringing this up, he said to me, Scott is really, positive about what you guys are doing in tennis. But he said, I just got to let you know, he goes, the USDA will never use the word system. And so, but anyway, I've got to say this because Andy just mentioned Nick Saban. You think of Clemson football or Georgia football, it's a system. If you follow the coaching tree, it's just amazing. The success, people learn and they move on. But I like this about Saban. We actually had one of his players spend 3 days with us one time. That was fantastic. Barrett Jones. We have a film of Barrett Jones talking to us about Alabama football. Choices are just an illusion. I'm pretty sure if I get this right. Choices are just an illusion. If you want to be good, you have no choices. This is Nick Saban. Choices are just an illusion. If you want to be good, you have no choices. Mm-hmm. Going back to Tiley and a tennis mind, I'd have to research this, Dave. You might know. I did some work for the Roddick family through Tennis Academy when they owned it and after they sold it as well. And John was not there, but he saw him at the US Open, and I told him about people that we coached, Clayton Stanley, and you mentioned I think before this podcast, Chad Clark. Anyway, John said victory or death, but I was asking about John Roddick because Tiley saw him play before I did. Tiley was with us a long time. And he goes, yeah, he's good, but his little brother's going to be amazing. That's a tennis mind. I said, why do you say that? And Andy was right by the scorer's table, and he was hitting a backboard. And he's, 7, 8 years old, and everybody who went by, Andy just stopped him and said, hey, who won? What was the score? And then they would tell him. So these older kids, twice his age, a 14-year-old walks by, and some 7-year-olds going, hey, who won? What was the score? And he just turned around and hit balls. The one thing I mentioned earlier is tennis camps. I said I was going to talk about tennis camps. It's all who you talk to get things approved. Dave Fish and Dave Benjamin, both Harvard guys. One was coaching Harvard. Dave Benjamin was coaching Princeton. So how it happened was the women's coach was watching me teach tennis and group dynamics. And so we all, Gordon Graham, so we all sit on the bleachers, and I just blow my whistle and I yell a few things, and practice is running without any coaches. So Gordon Graham, he didn't say anything, but he went back and talked to Dave Fish, and he talked to me about, then what happened was for me to help with a tennis camp. So they called me up and I said, well, it's like sugar on sugar cereal. I can come up and train your staff, but you'd be best to send your director here for a long period of time. And Cheyenne Hawk, that happened. He came for a long weekend. Then he convinced him. He came back the second time. He came back for 17 days. So Dave Fish and Dave Benjamin, one way to help train young coaches is through tennis camps. And what happened through all this, I couldn't believe that Dave Benjamin said, what we really need to do is train college tennis coaches, because most college tennis coaches, they just played at the college they went to, and that's how they get their start in tennis. Maybe they're under a great, complete, all-encompassing coach, but typically college tennis is not anything about how to teach beginners. And what do people need to do is we need to have people embrace teaching beginners. So Tiley knows the tennis camp business. At that time, I remember Dave Benjamin, he was a fan of Tiley. And he didn't know that Tiley had this connection where he spent all this time being trained. But tennis camps, I just remember it through all of that is I was told by Billy Pate, who I don't know that well, but he's the coach at Princeton. He said, it's great that you have Dave and Dave supporting you, but you needed to get in front of the board. And how Tyler Junior College happened was the president of the board of trustees. He knew that I had studied tennis under Braden, Vandermeer, and Van Horn. And he had set up a program for dental hygienists. So you got to talk to the board. And, a lot of people are saying that's going to be different for Tiley in the USTA versus Australia. But tennis camps, say, okay, that's a great way to improve the young coach. That's an entry point for them. But tennis players, when they go to camp, it's the fun factor. That's one of the biggest challenges is let's make it fun. And, Vic Braden's motto, laugh and win. And yeah, you got to make it fun, but it can't be so much fun that no learning's taking place. So Peter Burwash, his line, the personality of the pro. But tennis camps, we touched upon that last time that, that would be a great way for people really to learn. And there should be a meeting of the minds where it's not, just an organized activity, but kids can go to camp and the coaches, that's where, even if it was like the beginning of the camp and the end of the camp, and then what do kids, what do they take away from a camp? And, I one time was speaking at the PTR and did a lot of work for Julian Krinsky. What a great guy. And, he's so nice to introduce me as I walked in late to his lecture. And he said, what Steve does is an education. What I do is an experience. And you want to have it be both. And I mean, and I think he was being very humbled because, he went out of his way to try to have his camps. And then he expanded so much where he wasn't just doing tennis. He was doing everything under the sun, but it was all about trying to be quality driven. But tennis camps, and young people, last year for the ITA, we put together a training tape. Dave Secker and I taught some classes remotely for the ITA, the Intercollegiate Tennis Association. Dave Secker, who's at North Carolina State. And then Matt Clore helped us out, who was with the USTA, Dave Secker. But Ivan Osaretz, who puts these podcasts together, he did the bulk of the work. And I know you two have seen the tape. And, it's that time of year where tennis camps the staffs have to be hired. And I think it was 74 minutes long. And, people were just saying it's too long. I wrote 74 minutes. We had that program at Tyler Junior College. We were training people for 9 months. And Tiley has such great organizational skills. So eventually, when he was going off to Europe and doing this, that, and the other thing, the tennis camp was running like a machine, but it was run based on how we ran the camp at Tyler Junior College. And it was all based on these pillars that we have. But I think that's important is that, high school tennis, college tennis, we could add to the list, but there's so many things from a player development standpoint. A lot of great people, a lot of great effort over the years. Tennis needs a shot in the arm. We do have
tennis camps. I mean, sorry.
No, I was just
thought you were done. Keep going, my man.
No, I was just going to say we have the 4 Super Bowls, and that's where McNamee, who used to be critical of Tiley, is he did an amazing job with the Australian Open, and to me the U.S. Open is already fantastic, and he's going to make it even better, and that's going to be a major emphasis. But that's where Javier Palenque is right, is that what's going on at the grassroots level. But yeah, tennis camps, either one of you guys, and we'll wrap it up.
No, I was going to say, when you look at most tennis camps that I've seen, on big campuses as well, they're being taught by high school kids, that are a little bit older and or young college kids, so they have very little experience, but they're able to feed a ball and supervise. That's really what you're getting. The same thing, it makes me think a little bit of, years ago, Nick Bollettieri has this thing he would sell at conferences called Tennis in a Can.
Right.
I don't know if you remember that. I remember that. You buy tennis in a can, but really it's what the GreatBase could be for so many of those camps, which it has been for Harvard. And then high school teams is somewhat like a tennis in a can, but it's just a curriculum, but okay, you could have this whole workbook that Harvard has, or had, that you just go through and this basic drills and, just a little bit of training and you go through it, to run those programs, both high school and tennis camps, it would make a big difference. And I think the people running it, the kids, they would like it too, because everybody's just kind of going, well, what drills do we do? And, how do you fill the time? And it's a lot of times, okay, ball pickup and water break and, okay, run 3 laps, around the courses, trying to kill time instead of really having an organized plan to go through it. So that's what I would suggest.
No, well put. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I can sum it up in one word: education. Education. For all of the things that we have discussed tonight. I mean, it's education, and that's where I'm a big believer. Like I said, I've used my dad's analogy when he took us hunting and told me not to flock shoot, and pick my duck or goose and line up on it and lead it and pull the trigger. And I think, my hope is that Craig will be able to not flock shoot and not have so many balls in there, even the most organized person, and that the people on the boards will cooperate with them, because he has an incredible background through his involvement, with you, through his experiences he's gained since then, and he could really stop a trend that is headed the wrong way in American tennis if he puts the right people in the right spots. But it's all education, in my opinion.
No, that's education. Yeah, what Andy was saying, tennis camps can be the blind leading the blind. Yeah, he's not going to come in, obviously guns blazing and say, we got to do this, this, and this. It's like such an overwhelming, it's a large organization, as I said earlier. But during COVID, we saw how tennis was taught in garages. And it was like, are you kidding me? And, I come from the hockey world, so I'm not going to be politically correct. It's like, well, wait a minute, the Braden thing, come, shut up and show them how to hang under the racket. I think one project, to get tennis where it's taught in a garage, a carport, a parking lot. There's so many proposals that could be put together, but just because really, I think the USTA, if you look back over many years, they've adopted some programs, they've adopted some policies. And if they were just adopt that one thing that we could do is get into the household and then how to teach. To me, it's like putting a model airplane together. These are the grips. These are the body balance positions. These are the checkpoints. And now let's go with some application. This is how you trace the swing against the wall. It's not rocket science. The Einstein thing. If you can explain your subject to a 6-year-old, you know your subject. Einstein again. If you know the history of your subject, you know your subject. And that makes, I think, go through the schools program and high school coaches and all these different ways to improve tennis. But parents, for the most part, 99%, 98%, hopefully it's way up there. They care about their kids and they want an opportunity and they want an option for their kids. And, that's tennis. People just need to know, okay, there's a different learning curve to hitting a tennis ball opposed to dribbling a basketball. One of the easiest sports to pick up is lacrosse. Well, if you want to be a fantastic lacrosse player, I'm not taking any shots at lacrosse, but cradling a lacrosse ball and rallying a tennis ball are like two different animals. And that's one of the reasons for a while, I think pickleball has taken over, but lacrosse was the fastest growing sport in America at one point, or way up there. Yeah, hopefully for our listeners, it's good to have Andy online, the founder of our GreatBase podcast. Hopefully these crazy podcasts. I know the numbers are not we're not the Andy Roddick show, but the numbers are what they are. But I meet people all the time that tell me they listen to quite a few of the podcasts, if not all of them. There are some people listen to all of them.
Hey, we're kid friendly.
Yeah, we're not dropping
We're keeping the high standard going.
They're not dropping F-bombs, but sometimes I'd like to just go, ugh. When you swear, your heart rate goes down a little bit because.
Yeah, but you can just say potatoes, and it's going to do the same thing.
Point well taken. But no, it's the expression "you gotta be kidding me." With no, it was certainly politically incorrect. I apologize, Patrick Mortogolu. I know how to pronounce your name, the American way anyway, Monigulu. But he's the best marketer in tennis. That's not the most efficient way to hit a backhand volley. That's where the grip police. That's where the internet, Vic Braden, 1989, it's been around a long time. So much bad information is going out so fast. And a coach worked with me for 15 years, Roberto Calla. You just watch people play and he would say, no information. I tell our kids all the time, I said, yeah, look at that kid hit the ball, but, watch them move as well. They're moving better than you. They're competing better than you. So it's not just forehands and backhands, but ball striking has to be high on the list.
Yep. Education.
There you go.
Education.
All right, listeners, Andy, Dave, everybody, thanks. I hope you got something out of this. The tennis treasure chest, another nugget or two. Okay, adios, amigos.
Right,
another podcast
in
the books.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Everybody.
Thanks, you, Dave. You too. Yep. Bye.